If we are all sitting comfortably, I will begin. Because we are beginning today a new series, Love God, Love People, the series. And we're going to be looking at John's letters, a set of 3 letters that come near the end of the Bible. Obviously, Revelation is the last one, and just back from there, there's a few short letters. We're going to be digging into those. We'll be looking at in them what the Bible says about life and love and God and how they all fits together. It's not cold, hard theory, but good, kind truths that will and can shape, can reorient our relationships with God, our relationships with each other. I'm really excited to be starting this series. I've been looking forward to it for a little longer than usual because I actually prepared this just over a year ago. We thought it would be good to put together, and then we weren't sure it was the right time to do that. And we come around to this autumn and feel, no, this is the moment. I'm excited about that. Perhaps you wouldn't have even been in the room a year ago to hear that, but you are now. You know, perhaps you haven't watched us online before and you are today, and that's great that you are here for this. I'm just excited that when we open the Bible, we're expecting God to speak a now word to us. There's something of his order in our lives and in the circumstances of our lives. I wonder what God might want to speak to you, that he's waited in this moment for the beginning of this series, to this time to speak to you today. What does he want to say to us? How does he want us to hear him about loving him and loving people? Now, these 3 letters might need a little explanation as an introduction. They're slightly different than some of the other letters in the Bible. And without going too much into all of that now, I've made a little Steve's frequently asked questions about 1, 2, and 3 John. Okay, there's some notes here I've made for you that explain a little bit more about the background to the letters. I'm hoping that as we look at this series together, you might want to go home and read through the rest of the letters, and I hope those notes will help you understand who wrote them, why they wrote them, how they wrote them, some of those kind of questions. So do grab one of those on the way out. What I will tell you for now is that it's most likely John who wrote the letters, 1, 2, and 3 John. There's a clue there, isn't there, in the name, the title of the letters. But the particular John was actually one of the first 12 followers or disciples of Jesus. Jesus calls them, and he was one of the first that he calls. And then he pops up in other parts of the Bible too. We read about him through Acts as well. Jesus called him and his brother the sons of thunder. I mean, can you imagine that kind of a name? Can you imagine sons of thunder? Cue sound team. Oh yeah. Never quite happens when you're expecting it, does it? I get that these days being called the Sons of Thunder might sound like perhaps John and his brother James were in some sort of glam rock band or something, you know. They were good on air guitar and all the rest of that. But in the Bible, when people spoke about thunder, they were speaking something, they were often thinking about some sense of God's voice. There is a sort of otherworldliness to a rumble of thunder, isn't there? Although we scientifically understand exactly what it is, it's sort of, whew, okay, there's something even now. And through history, there's been a sense that in the Bible times, there was a definite sense that thunder made people think about God speaking. It made them think that God was powerful, that he was glorious, that he had profound things to say. When the Bible speaks about God speaking like thunder, it often is thinking about him speaking to our distress. And so Jesus calls James and his brother John these sons of thunder. Like that's the kind of voice that they might have or develop. And at the time, I think, to be honest, John was more likely to stress people out than speak to their distress, or speak powerfully or profoundly in any way. You see, when God calls us, and when he speaks stuff into our lives, we don't always fully recognize that at first. Sometimes it can take a while for us to know God growing that and shaping that in our lives. Sometimes he speaks things to us that he wants us to become and to believe him for, as we follow him and listen to him, as we let him shape our hearts in the way that we love him and love other people. I mean, it's the same with Peter. Jesus called Peter the rock. I mean, for most of the time when I read about him in the New Testament, or when Jesus was around, he was more of a jelly man than a rock. I mean, he was all over the place. And yet, that is what he became in the power of the Holy Spirit. And maybe there's some sense too that that's true for James and for John, who we understand wrote this letter. But by the time he wrote it, he was an old man, writing to people in difficult days. It's probably something penned near the end of his life. There were people he'd been close to, not just, visited for a while. He'd known them for decades. But they were people who were at risk of not holding on to faith that they'd known and shared quite as tightly or as close as they could have done. And I get that, because when life's hard, it's really easy to lose perspective. We don't necessarily need clever explanations when life seems turned completely upside down. We need reassurance about what we thought we already knew, and is that really true, and how is that making a difference? We need to know that we're not alone, that God is there. We kind of need someone to thunder God's voice into our lives, don't we? In a way that I think John was gifted to do that. I think when life's really hard, we need reorientation. We need to see, and we're going to have a look at the first few verses of John and see how he begins to do that. So I'm going to read from the Bible. I'm going to read 1 John chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. I'm reading from the ESV translation. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we've seen with our eyes, which we've looked upon and have touched with our hands concerning the word of life, the life that was made manifest. And we've seen it and testified to it and proclaimed to you the eternal life which was with the Father and was made manifest to us. That which we have seen and heard, we proclaim also to you, that you may have fellowship with us. And indeed, our fellowship is with the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. And we're writing these things so that our joy may be complete. It's quite an abrupt opening, don't you think? If you know any of the other letters that are in the Bible, the usual form is to say, we'd start John. He's going to mention himself and then say who he's writing to the church in, or the churches across an area. And he might then speak some other truth about himself or them or God. But he leaps right into this. Unlike any other letters, there's not this sort of me to you format. What it comes with is in the beginning. John seems to like doing that. If you've read his gospel, it's a little bit similar. He wants to start because it all begins for John in the beginning. He's not going to forget where this started and what it is and what it means for all of them. He understands that sweep of salvation history. And we need to go back to the beginning if we're going to make sense of anything in our lives. There's an order that existed before I existed, before I felt or experienced or expressed anything, before I discovered or decided anything about myself or the life or world or my theory of life and relationships. And our individualized culture is inclined to assume that life and love and joy and happiness all begins with me. Our culture doesn't necessarily want to go back too far before ourselves. But in the Bible, everything always begins with God. I wonder what it means for each of us to turn our lives that way up. For that truth, everything always begins with God and what he thinks life is, who he says I am. So after this abrupt opening, there's three things about loving God and loving people, which I think it's worth pointing out in the time we've got to think about them. And the first is that there's something about life that is fundamentally revealed. In verse 2, John uses a word, manifest. Some of the different translations might use a different word. It might say appeared. Some use the word revealed. But it's a term that means made visible. It's when things sort of become clear all at once. It's where we get the word epiphany from, because this sort of term is about that kind of bing, that light bulb moment where we're like, right, the penny drops, as we say. I get it now. There's something that's of the truth of what John is saying about life and the faith that they know, that they only know because there was a moment where this is for real, isn't it? This is something to hang your hat on. This is what makes sense. Life is that way up. I get it. That is who I am. It is who God is. Right. Okay, this Jesus stuff. I think I see it now. That light bulb moment. And for John, it's all about that relationship between God and love. One writer, Eugene Peterson, puts it in this way: if we want to deal with God the right way, we have to learn to love the right way. If we want to love the right way, we have to deal with God the right way. God and love can't be separated. Loving God and loving people had been personally revealed to John. He got something that he'd shared with them and wanted to remind them of. It had been personally revealed to John day by day with Jesus. We can read that and see it in the accounts we've got in the Bible, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as they speak about Jesus. He'd been, I don't know if I can say this, but he'd been close enough to Jesus to smell him. What did Jesus smell like? And that revelation continued in his life, despite John's own impatience with other people, despite the misunderstandings, the times where he heard Jesus say stuff, but he didn't quite get it. And despite he and his brothers' rampant ambition to be the most important Jesus followers in the world and heaven forever. There was an amazing grace that comes to John and helps him keep getting it. I get who Jesus is, up close and personal. It's amazing, despite John's own attempts to misunderstand it and to just want stuff for himself in it. He was still utterly convinced, no, I shouldn't have done that, shouldn't have said that, maybe shouldn't have gone there. Still, at the end of it, John describes himself as a disciple whom Jesus loved. He was the one Jesus loved, who repeatedly describes it. Well, what's the point? What am I driving at here? The point is there is a get it moment to life. There was for John. He knew there would be and needed to be for those he was writing to. That they needed to remember and hang on. It was an anchor point in their lives. And it needs to be an anchor point in each of our lives. It's how life makes sense. It's what we focus around as we are loving God and loving people. That's quite a different way of approaching life as maybe some people do, and we might see them doing that. Some people approach life as if, well, I think I've probably got this. I know the answer's in me somewhere. I just need the space or the opportunity or the affirmation to find that. I've got to find it in myself or discover that or somehow express that. And I need to express that and be understood. And if I'm not, well, I don't know if I can be me, or I don't know if anybody hears me or sees me or really knows me. Those things don't need revelation. They just need some kind of affirmation. But John is writing that life makes sense with revelation because revelation changes things. Frankly, it'll change just about everything. It'll change our character. It'll change our attitudes. John knew all too well it will change our ambition. It changes everything. Revelation of loving God and loving people changes each of us every day, day to day. In the same way John knew how much it had changed him. He was writing to them, reminding them what had been revealed because he knew that was the way they were going to keep growing and knowing and living and loving in the way that they were called to be. I know it doesn't always feel like that. I don't know about you, but I feel like there was a day when I found Jesus. Anybody get that thing? I'm pretty sure there was. I remember like, wow, yes, it's him, it's true, it's real. But what becomes clear to me as I read the Bible is that I didn't actually switch on the light. I think what happened is that I saw something amazing when the light was switched on for me. And in that moment, I called that finding Jesus. Oh, yeah, there he is. Wow, I found him. Without thinking that too much, I wonder what would happen if I'd have stayed in the dark. I wonder what happens to anybody stuck in the dark. Yet the truth is, I needed to be shown who Jesus is. I still do. I still need to know that more and more in my life. We all do in our lives. Even then, I know my attitudes towards other people, towards Jesus and myself can still send me off. I can misunderstand him, in any number of ways and in any number of directions. Because following Jesus is a journey of repentance and faith. If you've been here and you've seen us baptize people, you'll know we ask just those questions, don't we? We say, are you turning from everything that's you, and are you trusting everything that is him for the rest of your life? That's why we ask it when we baptize. That's so fundamental to what becoming a Christian is, and being it. Being a Christian is a life that is continuing to face him, to turn his way, and trust him in things. Whatever we understand of ourselves, or whatever else we think the world might work. It's a demonstration when someone gets baptized of that revelation they've had. That everything before Jesus, kind of drowns. It stays in the pool. It's underwater. What comes out is a new life. That is God's life, lived God's way. I wonder, how has your faith reoriented you? What is it that's been revealed to you that you go, absolutely, this is a game changer. Everything changes from here on. I know I thought this was life. I know I thought that's how it worked or whatever, but I get it. You know, I understand my rules, it didn't work. It's now God's rules. Life's completely different now. How is your faith reorienting you? How will it one day, do you think? There's something fundamental. If we're going to love God and love people, we know that we're going to do that out of what's been revealed to us, first thing. Second thing, we're going to know that and do that out of what's known. So there's something, there's a sort of revealed moment. There's something that we really profoundly know. And John uses some fascinating language to do that. He does it in sort of John's only style, it seems to me. Because it seems quite wordy. I don't know if you thought that as you look at it. You know, that which we've seen with our eyes, which we've looked upon. Now, excuse me, but, I don't know where that goes in a sort of plain-speaking English test, does it? You know, how do you see it if you haven't looked upon it? You know, what do you look upon it with if it isn't your eyes? There's a sort of like, you know, there's a little bit of overspeak somewhere in there. But what happened is he's using a particular way of speaking to emphasize that. And then he's repeating it for some additional emphasis. He's not exaggerating something. John absolutely had seen it. I think he's trying to remind them, do you not remember what I saw? I was like one of the first ones called. I was there when he was transfigured. I was the only disciple that stood at the cross with his mum and my mum. I was there with Peter at the tomb. Do you remember what I saw, guys? I saw it. I touched it. I saw it with my own eyes. He's trying to absolutely make his point. And he's using a certain type of language, a rhetoric. It's got a technical term. We don't need to bother too much about that. But it was something that was really well known at the time. If you wanted to say something about someone that was really important to you, you would often, slip into this mode of speaking. So people reading it would have get, all right, okay, no, he's talking about, of course, and a really important someone. He's talking about Jesus. Like, of course. Let's not forget who Jesus was and what that means. And he's, maybe, I'm trying to think of different analogies for that. If you get a jewel that is cut, you don't sit and look at it just like that. You turn it, don't you? You turn the jewel because as it turns, it sparkles. And the language is kind of doing that. He's trying to say something. If I just sort of turn this phrase, you're going to maybe get something more. It's going to catch your eye like, wowzers. Surely you will notice if I tell you how much I did see what I'm telling you about. I did know this. And you need to know that. It seemed like you saw it, John's thinking, when I told you. So don't forget it. Let's remember what we had and heard, what we've received together, what we absolutely know in our knowers. John might have been the last man standing, but everything he and the other disciples had told them about Jesus was still totally true. And the point was they should remember what they had seen and heard themselves. Boom, this is where John is starting in this letter to them. He didn't want them to be too easily shifted from their own ideas of, well, if God's a God of love, then here's what I think it is. What loving God and loving people is. He was like saying, what did Jesus say it is? Come on, what do you really know deep down in your knower? How do we hold on to the truth of Jesus when it seems like stuff around us is asking, is it still relevant? Is that really true? It was the same thing for them as we might experience now. What have we seen and heard about Jesus that's really, really important to remember? How are we going to stick with that? Because we know it. We've seen it with our own eyes. We've looked on it. with as good as. It's like, yes, that's my Jesus. What have you seen and heard about Jesus that someone else might need to see and hear? And how will you share that with them? Because that's the third thing that is key in John's opening terms. There's something about loving God and loving people that is shared. He talks about what it testifies to, and he speaks about what he's proclaimed to them. Something, it's not just, yep, I've seen it, great, I've got it. Thanks very much, let me know when you have. It's not like one of those sort of magic eyes. Have a look, go cross-eyed, see if you can figure it out yourself. Let me know whether it's a train or a horse, those sort of bot-eyed puzzles. He's not leaving that. He's like, no, we saw it. I saw it, you saw it, come on. He's appealing to them. And he's wanting to share that too. Because sharing something that's special or amazing is the most obvious response to that, isn't it? Something blows you away, sooner or later you feel like you've got to tell someone. I went to this concert, it was incredible. I was there when the sun went down. You wouldn't believe it. Where that may be or what you might see. It's simply giving a good report of good news. If someone thinks that's bad news, it might be worth asking why. How do we persuade someone who we've said something good to and they're pretty miffed or irritated about it? I know that can happen. I think there's a certain irony in that, to be honest. Someone may think we're trying to change their beliefs by telling them about ours. But the thing is, our belief is that love and joy and truth, when they're shared, are to be shared. That's what it is. That completes them in some way. And so stopping us sharing that is actually changing our belief. It's sort of stopping my own belief. Certain irony there. But I understand. I get if you're reluctant to share. I do get that. I do not want to be some kind of relentless Bible basher. I mean, they're not good news, are they? It's bad news for anybody, frankly. I'm not sure that's what it's driving at. But John is insisting that sharing all that's known and revealed of Jesus will in some way increase joy. And I find that quite remarkable. I mean, it's something I would like to do. I would like the world to be a happier place. Who wouldn't? But get this though, John, right, insists how important sharing is, even though his brother James was the first one of the 12 disciples to be martyred, to be killed for his faith. Look where sharing joy got your brother. John, eh? You sure you still want to do that? We read about it in Acts 12, verse 2. Herod had James killed at the sword. And John says, let's share joy. I mean, is that even a happy thing? Let's share Jesus. Let's share the joy of that. In fact, by the time this was written, it's likely John wrote this down at the end of his life. It's likely to that every other one of the disciples had been martyred. If church history and tradition is correct, John is possibly the only one of the 12 disciples who lived to an old age. All the others were martyred. And the records as we have of them appear that they were martyred quite quickly. All the 12 would have been killed, it's likely, by when this was most likely to have been written. Oh, and Paul. So, the 12 and some are getting slashed down, taken out for sharing their joy. And so John is writing to them saying, keep on sharing and know your joy. I mean, mind a bit blown, isn't it? Something profound in all of that. Most people I know, though, are looking for decent and lasting joy. They only seem to have found something partial, something that's sort of working, partial and a bit limited. Seems a bit rude, not to mention that we might just be onto a better joy that they could be part of. John will identify some other important aspects of loving God and loving people, but for the moment, that's all he's saying in these opening verses. The point is that our joy is only complete when it's shared, and John is not going to let anything put him off. He's going to say that even if he's the last one standing. I'm challenged by that. How much do I want to share that? I think, yeah, that's fine. If you don't want to know, that's fine with me. Don't hurt me. Kind of suits me a bit better, to be honest. But John is speaking. Wow. Because he knows that if that's shared, that maybe, just maybe, that could be a light bulb moment for someone. And what joy there would be if it was. What joy there would be, he says. When Jesus said, I am the way, he meant a way towards life with him and with every person and place that his love is going. He loves you, but his way is not a cul-de-sac that ends with you. His way is loving God and loving people that goes beyond you every time. And that looks to find a joy in that, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. Even in some of the hardest places, things we may not see in this country, but people do see around the world and still share their joy. It seems John was deliberately confronting the idea that anyone can have a personal relationship with Jesus that doesn't get personal with someone else. How do we feel in the light of that kind of a challenge? What if what we're prepared to share about Jesus is the real measure of what we actually believe about him? What if it's the real measure of whether we believe our complete joy is only found in sharing him? I'm challenged by those questions. What does that mean? Or am I happy to find joy somewhere else and maybe just share a bit of Jesus when it's easy and comfortable, when it's not going to cost me too much? I wonder, how are we hoping or expecting to experience joy, to know the kind of life, the loving God, loving people life that John wants to rumble into their lives with? How do we view other people's joy? Is it an inconvenience to us, an imposition on us? Do we have an expectation that someone else's joy might reveal something of God to us and fuel our joy? Or do we find it mildly irritating sometimes? I don't know. You know, it's a curious upside-down world in which we live, isn't it? In which, you know, some people, because living like that would be living for God's approval, for his joy, a satisfaction in him. Every day like that, for God's, for joy in God and his approval and wanting to share that, might well be called a fanatic in the world in which we live. And yet someone else who lives entirely for their own joy, for their own pleasure, and shares it all with us online for our approval is called an influencer. How does those two figure? Why don't we, which way up is life actually meant to go, people? Where are we truly meant to find our joy? What joy there is meant to be known in God's love as it's revealed to others, known by them, so that they can share it too. I want to try and finish here. Let me say, we've taken a first look at the opening verses of 1 John. And maybe we've heard a first rumble from the last son of thunder. I wonder how close to God you feel in the light of those kind of things, in these moments. I wonder if there are any light bulbs for you in terms of, maybe my life isn't quite the right way up. I wonder whether you're more conscious of what Jesus has revealed to you or maybe what else you need him to show you. Are you most aware of what you know and have seen of Jesus, or maybe thinking, right here and now, I wonder if there's other things I need to see and know of Jesus. I wonder if you're grateful for what's been shared about loving God and loving people, or grateful, even more grateful for the privilege that you might have. Wow, I get to share that with others.